Hey there, Deluxe fans! Hope you're feeling particularly magical today. As we all know, Isabella Madrigal was the character in Encanto who was portrayed as perfect, and in a way, we all thought she loved the role. She seemed to have everything going for her, and she was definitely worshipped for her powers rather than used like Luisa was. And to add on to the perfect vibes, her room seemed to give off princess perfection, with light colors and flowers everywhere. Well, creators from Encanto have spoken out about some of the details in her room, and it turns out they hid a disturbing detail amongst the Golden Child's room that most fans did not pick up on. It's no secret that Disney's Encanto focuses heavily on the pressure that can be put on people by members of their family, whether their family means to do it or not. Familial pressure is something that almost everyone in the world has to deal with at one point or another, and at different levels of severity. For some people, the pressure might come from the fear of disappointing your family, and for others, the pressure might stem from the ideal person that your family wants you to become. And in Encanto, they showed us that having a family with magical abilities doesn't save you from familial pressures. Mirabel is perhaps the best example of this. She was the only blood relative in her family that wasn't presented with an apparent gift that would allow her to help herself, her family, or the people in the town that the Madrigals take care of. Despite that though, Mirabel still did everything she could do to make the lives of those around her easier. These are often tasks that fell onto deaf ears, however, and Mirabel was never really seen for what she was trying to do, and rather she was only seen for what she couldn't do. It's made clear by Abuela Alma from almost the very beginning of the movie that she sees Mirabel more as a burden on her family than anything else. Whether she would admit it or not, Alma had always had a hard time seeing her family members beyond their magical gifts, and since Mirabel didn't have one, she was always pushed to the side or blamed for things going wrong. I honestly don't know how anyone could put up with that sort of pressure on a daily basis, and the pressure that Alma put on her family didn't only land on those who didn't have gifts. In fact, one of the family members who felt the most pressure from her family, aside from Mirabel, was actually the strongest member of the Madrigals. Luisa is seen throughout the movie constantly going above and beyond to help the townspeople with their chores. She would help out with even the simplest ones that any normal person shouldn't have a problem doing, because that's what was expected of her. Since she was gifted with such superior strength to those around her, the physical expectations that Alma had about Luisa would end up becoming nearly impossible to live up to, and that tore Luisa to pieces. She made that point clear in her song, Surface Pressure, when she said, "Under the surface, I'm pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service." No one should ever be made to feel that way, especially by their own family, but sadly, that's how Alma made everyone in the Madrigal home feel, whether she meant to or not. If they couldn't live up to her expectations, they were doing something wrong in her eyes. The only member of the Madrigal family who seemed to live up to their abuela's expectations would have to be Señorita Perfecta Isabella, and as it turns out, there may have been a disturbing detail found in her room that showed us that she too was feeling the same familial pressures that her family had been dealing with. According to Camila Andre, one of the environment art directors on the film, Isabella's room was designed to be covered in bright pastel colors as a way to give her character a very princess-like impression. This was something that, on the outside, would appear relatively normal for a Disney character, but Camila mentions that there is another meaning behind the curtain designs in Isabella's room that is only truly clear to her. He explained that the floral curtains and drapes that we see around Isabella in her room are the perfect example of Isabella being trapped by her family's expectations. It isn't until after she breaks away from the pressure put on her by her family that Isabella's room becomes far more colorful and expressive than before, showing that before breaking free, Isabella felt trapped by her own perfection. Now, something that most fans have realized when watching Disney's Encanto is that the film has a lot to do with perspective and how everyone sees things differently. For instance, throughout the majority of the movie, Mirabel saw herself as the outcast in the family since she hadn't been gifted any powers, and at first, she felt like she was the only member of her family who was feeling this way. However, after opening up with her siblings and elders, Mirabel learned that the other members of the Madrigal family felt the same way that she did, inadequate and unable to reach the expectations that had been laid out ahead of them. Isabella's curtains offer up another great example of how perspective can change how you view something. To any other member of the Madrigal family or the audience, the curtains just looked as though they were beautiful room decor fit for the perfect young woman. But to Isabella, the curtains and drapes have a vastly different and darker meaning. To her, the curtains represent a sort of prison that Isabella has been placed into. They are a constant reminder of the fact that she is supposed to be perfect, and all of the unrealistic expectations that she is supposed to live up to. And it's clear that the expectations are there. Abuela Alma expected nothing less than for Isabella to be perfect. Now, the exact reason that Alma chose to hold her granddaughter on such a pedestal is never directly told to us, but we have a few theories. In one of our previous Encanto videos, we spoke about why their Abuela would expect Isabella to be so perfect, and if you haven't seen the video, we will be leaving a link in the description below, so be sure to check that out. The gist of our theory as to why Isabella is Alma's favorite is simply because of how much she reminded Alma of herself. I mean, Isabella is practically a spitting image of what her grandmother looked like when she was younger. And as you know, Alma had never had what would be considered a perfect life, despite how close she got. Alma fell in love with Pedro, and the two would end up married with triplets. It seemed to be the start of perfection for Alma, but sadly, the joy didn't last long. As you know, Alma's happy life turned tragic when her hometown was raided by marauders and bandits. That very same night, she would end up losing her husband, who sacrificed himself in an attempt to stop their attackers from pursuing the villagers. The idea of the perfect life was stolen from her. However, when she saw herself in Isabella, we believe that Alma figured she could help Isabella live the perfect life. Alma wanted to essentially live vicariously through her granddaughter. That's why she was so adamant about Isabella being perfect and graceful. Not a single thing could be out of place for her, not even a single flower. This is why she removed the single white flower that bloomed in Isabella's hair while they were talking about Mariano. It didn't match the rest of the flowers and was seen as an imperfection that needed to be plucked away. Speaking of Mariano, that's another example of a form of pressure that Alma forced on Isabella. The only reason that Abuela wanted Mariano to marry Isabella was simply that he was supposedly the most attractive man in the village, which made him perfect for her beautiful granddaughter. There was just one major problem, however. Isabella didn't want to marry Mariano, not even a little bit. She was only ever going to go through with the engagement because it's what her grandmother wanted for her. And as everyone in the Madrigal house knew, if Abuela Alma says it must be done, then it must be done. I mean, let's be clear, Abuela runs this show. In other words, while anyone who knew Isabella thought she was living the perfect life, she was trapped in an emotional and mental prison, and Abuela Alma laid the foundation. Isabella basically felt locked in, no matter where she was or what situation she was in. While she's in her room, she's trapped by the constant reminder of how perfect she is supposed to be. So much so that she practices picture-perfect poses. And when she wasn't in her room, she was trapped by the family's expectations that they laid out for her. I mean, she was even stuck in a relationship that she wanted nothing to do with. And I don't know about you, but to me, that doesn't even come close to perfect. Isabella didn't even get to have a decent relationship with her younger sister, at least not for a while. If you saw Encanto, you will know that Isabella and Mirabel didn't typically see eye to eye with one another. But what's interesting is the actual reason that the two clashed with each other so much. While we know that Mirabel is, to an extent, jealous of her sister for being granted a gift like the rest of her family, what the movie doesn't make clear until Isabella's ballad, What Else Can I Do?, is that she is jealous of Mirabel for the exact opposite reason. In her eyes, Mirabel doesn't carry the same burden as the rest of the family. She doesn't realize that Mirabel feels left out for not having a gift, and instead, Isabella believes that her sister is the lucky one. Without a gift, Abuela wouldn't dare to set high expectations for Mirabel. It's ironic, really. The two were equally jealous of one another for very similar reasons, and neither of them knew it. They just assumed that the other one was rude and that they didn't want to get along with one another. That all changed as soon as Mirabel and Isabella have their heart-to-heart toward the end of the film. It's actually around that time that Isabella realizes just how much of a burden her little sister Mirabel was really carrying. As Abuela yelled at Mirabel for helping Isabella express herself properly, Mirabel justifiably argued back. And not just for herself, no. She let Abuela and everyone that was around them hear at the end of the day she would be nothing but a disappointment to Alma for not having a gift, while at the same time laying into her about how much pressure she puts on Luisa and Isabella to use their gifts as if they were their identities. During that moment, Isabella could do nothing but watch and realize just how strong her little sister was, and how Mirabel truly felt walking in the shadow of the magical Madrigals. You can tell that Isabella and Mirabel bonded throughout those few moments more than they had in the past. It's shortly after Mirabel stood up for her older sisters that their casita came crumbling to the ground and Mirabel disappeared. You can tell that Isabella, like the rest of the Madrigals, was genuinely concerned for her younger sister as she helped the family search for her. Their bond is only further solidified when Mirabel returned home with Abuela Alma after the two reconciled. Isabella and her sisters worked side by side to rebuild their home without any powers, and with the three siblings growing closer than ever, Isabella's happiness bloomed bigger and brighter than any flower could. For she was no longer trapped in the prison of expectations that her family placed her in, and she was finally free to be herself and experiment with her life. The creators of Encanto really took it upon themselves to focus on the finer details in the film, and that's what makes it such a magical movie. It's the finer details of the film that help to create a bigger picture for all of us to enjoy, and that combination of simplicity plus intricacy is amazing. I know that the Madrigal family seemed perfect on the surface, but as you saw watching the film, they all had their own struggles that they learned to deal with. What do you think about the amount of pressure that Abuela placed on her family? Does the fact that she didn't realize she was doing it make it okay? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. As for now, that's all Disney fans. Let us know what video you'd like to see next in the comments, and like and subscribe for more magically packed videos.